So if you're new here, you may as yet be unfamiliar with the similarities between a cat playing with a piece of string and my impulse control when it comes to buying camera gear. And on that note, here's my new Panasonic S5IIX. And you might be wondering why, as somebody who shoots a Nikon Z9, would you buy a Panasonic second camera? And there are a few reasons, but number one is I actually just really like using Panasonic cameras. Obviously, I should have probably picked up something made by Nikon, but they've got a bit of a gap in their range. There's the Z8, which is equivalent to the Z9 and is just as good a video camera, but still doesn't have a flippy screen. There's the Z7 II, the Z7, the Z6 II, the Z6, all of which don't have a flippy screen. There's the Z5, which doesn't have a flippy screen. There's the Z50. I actually don't know if that has a flippy screen. The only ones that do are the Z30, which is a vlogging camera that has no built-in image stabilisation and overheats in about 20 minutes of recording 4K. Not really for me. And the new Nikon ZF, which is a retro camera that has a very good video spec and it has a flippy screen, but this is a camera primarily to be used for video, and there are other minor annoyances with the Nikon system for video, like there are with practically every manufacturer, and one of them is that in order to record 4K 422 10-bit, which is what I like to record in because I record a lot with natural landscapes that have a lot of subtle gradients and things like that. And in most cameras, if you want to shoot in that profile, you have to record in H.265. The problem with this being that if you don't use a Mac, which has very easy support for this, then you are effectively a bit stuck because NVIDIA and AMD do not put hardware decoders in their graphics cards to handle that combination of specs. And so editing that video is just a recipe in frustration. This was a major problem I had with the Fujifilm X-H2S, which was actually what I did buy when I chose not to buy this earlier this year. And obviously that went very well, as you can see in this video over there. Because of that, it's nice to come to a camera system like the Lumix system, where video is just easy. Even the Nikon is a little bit frustrating in this regard, and I tend to record in NRAW on the Z9 because it's the most performant for me to edit on my computer. But the S5 II will record 4K 422 10-bit in H.264, which is widely supported by everything. It makes nice small files. I get an hour and 40 record time in the format that I shoot on a 128 gig, not very fast SD card. It's just super convenient and it's affordable to run, and I really, really like using it. It's just an easy video camera, particularly because it has one of the best image stabilization systems in the market. I mean, this is one of my lenses I use for filming. This is the 24-105, which has a built-in optical stabilizer. It's a bit of a chunker, it's quite a large lens, but the video quality in terms of image stabilization is astonishing, as you can see from this clip. It's just very natural the way in which it moves, and this is something that most other makes, including Nikon and especially Sony, really struggle with in terms of not just smoothing out the jitters and things like that, but to make it look natural as you move. But for whatever reason, Panasonic have somehow nailed it in the S5 Mark II. It's got fantastic image stabilization, particularly considering it's a full frame camera. And I just really like using it for that reason. So for video, this was almost a no-brainer for me. I mean, yes, duplicating some lenses across two systems, but it has some other benefits too. And one is that I really, really like the picture quality out of the Panasonic cameras. I loved the S5. Didn't love the autofocus because it just didn't work. And you can see from this clip from an old video, it just, in low contrast situations, it was just completely lost. But they fixed that in this camera. It works very well. I have encountered one very Panasonic-y issue where it focused on its own lens flare inside the filter stack. That was quite impressive, and that was because I was using a macro lens. And thankfully, it includes an option in the menus to allow you to set a custom focus limiter, and so I solved that problem quite quickly. But aside from that, it's worked fantastically. My past 2 videos were made using this camera, and it's been actually quite frustrating to go back and film this video with the Z9, and this will likely be the last one that I do so with it in quite a while, because this is my preferred video camera. But it's also a photo camera that I really enjoy using, and it's not something that people necessarily associate with the Panasonic Lumix cameras. Maybe more so with the Micro Four Thirds system. For example, people like James Popsis used a G9 for a long period of time and got great results with it. I really like shooting photos on this camera. In fact, some of my favourite ever photos I've taken, these ones from Switzerland last year, were taken on the S5, and I found at the time, when I had the S5 and my OM1 in my bag together, the camera I reached for to take landscapes or to take travel shots and things like that was the S5, despite the fact its autofocus didn't work, although usually mountains don't move too much. But for that reason, I bought this as a more portable travel camera. The Z9 is hilariously inconvenient to take with you on a day out, for example, if I'm just doing a touristy sort of thing. It's huge, it's expensive, and it's heavy, so overall it just causes you problems. It doesn't even fit in most bags unless you stick a tiny pancake lens on it, which was my solution for the last few months. So just taking something like this is much more convenient. It's a much better size, it's not too chunky, although the added depth from this new viewfinder with the fan arrangement has added a bit of length there, which makes it a little bit more awkward to fit into bags, but it is comfortable to use, it's comfortable up to your eye, and you don't feel like you're smashing your nose into the screen. So taking photos on it has been a pleasant experience so far. I won't be shooting wildlife on it, although it won't be bad. Its low light performance is out of this world. It is fantastic. I've had photos from the S5 at 51,200 ISO that were totally usable. The colours were maintained very nicely, and weirdly I had an instance, and this is a photo of a wren that was flying in some reeds, where the autofocus remarkably worked really well, and that was the problem with that camera. It was unpredictable. Sometimes it worked great, sometimes it was questionable, for lack of a better way of describing it. But that was something I was looking forward to with this as well. I will use it for more everyday photos and just when I don't need to take my full setup with me. Now, one thing that I've missed about the Fujifilm X-H2S was that it had those film simulation modes, and when I got that camera I didn't think that I would particularly care, but I did. I ended up really quite enjoying them. So I was quite pleasantly surprised to see that the Panasonic S5IIX has essentially support for a similar thing. It has some built-in profiles that make use of this, such as the L monochrome profile, which is a monochrome profile, unsurprisingly, that has been apparently based on some mix of film stocks. I'm not too sure exactly what they've based it on, but it does give you some interesting customizability, including the fact that it has built-in grain support, so it can add artificial grain to the photo, and I've been really pleased with the results of this profile, adding a few tweaks and adjusting it slightly to my taste, and it's giving me a really pleasing monochrome image. But I don't shoot black and white that much, although I do use it to practice before I shoot black and white film. And the thing that I suppose is perhaps more interesting to me in this camera is the L Classic Neo profile, which is supposedly a sort of a colour film inspired profile. I don't really like the colours of this profile. It just seems to lift the shadows and wash the colours out. But it does have some interesting features, namely grain and colour grain support. But what good is that if you don't like the colours? Well, one of the features that they touted with the S5 Mark II and that I thought I would have absolutely zero use for is the real-time LUT support. So In video, you can add a LUT file, which is a lookup table, and you're using color grading on the PC. So I have LUTs that I use for grading this footage, for example. And you can add this support for photos. I had no real need for it for video because I'm happy to just do it in my video editor later. It takes very little time. But this camera supports it for photos, and it supports it in custom forks of the L Classic Neo mode. So suddenly you've got effectively a customizable film simulation color profile on a Panasonic camera. That's really exciting, and I'm going to have a play around with it. It's going to require me to take some photos on some different film stock and take equivalent photos on this at the same time to try and match them. But it's something that I'm really excited about because having the ability to take good in-camera JPEGs does occasionally save you a bit of time. It's not that I'm going to use them solely for everything, but I like to take everyday photos. I like to just take snapshots as I'm going around, and I'd like to not have to load them into the atrocity that is Adobe Lightroom Classic. So having a nice JPEG out of camera appeals to me. It's why I enjoyed the Fujifilm cameras more than I even expected to, and I'm very excited to try it out on this too. But if you use a Lumix camera yourself, if you have used them, if you have any tips that I might have missed, because it has been basically a year since I used the S5, please do let me know down in the comments, because I'm genuinely interested. And there's things I'd forgotten that I liked about it, like the fact that you can't remove the body cap unless you press the lens release button. That's kind of nice. Kind of weird. I don't actually know why I like it, but I do like it. So kind of glad to have that back. The only thing I would say about this version is that this is the Batman edition, the S5IIX. I'm not a massive fan of the blackout version of it, although it does still have a red record button. Personally, I think it kind of looks like the stand-in products you get in IKEA showrooms. That might just be me though. Everyone else seems to really like it, but I quite liked the red ring. But it does add a few extra features that I actually have a use for. So that's why I have this version. It's the Batman edition, and I mean, it's pretty cool, but it does cause some interesting trouble for autofocus to pick up on because it's just a shadow. In fact, it looks like the placeholder I put in the thumbnail for when I bought the XH2S. Never mind. Yeah, thank you very much for watching. Please do put any comments down below, and I'll see you next time.